So the kakapo is really a fascinating bird. It seems like this is like the official New Zealand page for the bird. It's a large nocturnal flightless lek breeding. It's fascinating. It even says a real oddity. It's really fascinating. So they've gone through really extensive efforts to save this bird. They have relocated it a couple decades back to an island off the south of New Zealand to try to save its population. And it sort of echoes some other breeding programs for bird species like the whooping crane. My initial impression here, because the whooping crane is really like people have to help them not imprint on other people, even though they're doing these breeding programs. And they often teach them to fly as well. So it's really impressive some of the lengths that people will go through to save these kinds of bird populations that they deem charismatic and important ecologically. So what's fascinating about this project here is that they are sequencing the genomes of all these bird species. And I know, I don't think it's on here actually, but the kakapo has also had its full genome sequenced because they have such low genetic diversity. A lot of their offspring are inbred, and that means that they're less likely to survive. So by doing this kind of genetic sequencing for bird species, it ensures that the offspring are more varied and thus more likely to survive. So it's interesting that they're doing this with so many other types of birds, and to me it shows that the kind of program that this team in New Zealand is doing for the kakapo now to ensure genetic diversity is probably more likely to happen for other types of charismatic bird species in the future. So the thing that makes the kakapo conservation program possible seems like it's the technology. So each of the birds wears this little backpack type transmitter, and the scientists can really get a lot of information about not only where each of them is physically on the islands where they're living, which are all predator free, but they can figure out which one is ready for a mate. This is really interesting because vigorous just mating. So if they just mated, and they also give a mating score to see how good they think the mating was, how effective it might have been. Each bird has an individual feeding station. Where that went. A feeding station, a nest kit, all these traps. So then they also monitor them from afar, and they have this sort of like elaborate internet system built around the island. I know that there are other bird research programs that are using similar technology. So avian nanotags is one version of this. And it looks like there's a study from 2012 that suggests that they were, someone else was doing the telemetry system, tracking them from afar. So the kinds of techniques that this team is using are really important and blazing some trails for what conservation projects might use. This is another piece of technology that's really interesting. The kakapo team is using these smart eggs that have sensors in them. So they take the eggs after they're laid in the nest, and then they incubate them safely here. So this says we leave dummy eggs behind. So when that chick hatches, the mom can exert some more maternal behaviors. So it looks like this, their collaborator, the International Birds of Prey, are also using the same technique for vultures. And it seems they're getting slightly different information, but they're basically doing it for the same purpose, to make sure that the eggs actually hatch a successful offspring, and then the moms aren't surprised when a chick shows up that is theirs. Something that I have struggled with in the past when reading about these kinds of very elaborate conservation programs for a specific species is, there's so much money and resource that goes into these kinds of programs when that kind of thing could be used for several different other species. And now that we are approaching the sixth extinction, there's something like 1 million species are at risk. This becomes an even more pressing question. And what's interesting is this source here actually. So he says, if we stopped the conservation, yeah, we could save 3 or 4 other species, but because the kakapo is so charismatic that it's actually encouraging more people to be involved in conservation, more people to donate money that could be used as well for other types of species conservation. So ultimately, he and I think a lot of other people see this as a net positive, even if it means that some other species might go extinct or be endangered as a result.